Hello and welcome back to the World Leaderboard, the podcast where we tell you who's winning and losing in politics each week. This week I'm joined by Rory.
Hello.
And Georgina.
Hello.
It's been a minute.
Wow.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
Sofa. Good, thanks.
Happy to be back on the leaderboard.
Me?
Well, you should see where we put you. You've not been here and we're like, still not here. Happy to be back?
Yeah.
Glad to hear it.
I think
The
it's
enthusiasm.
the first non-Zach episode in a long
In a
time.
while.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
true, actually.
And you're getting 3 of them. So if you hate
3 on
Zach,
the trot.
good news. If you love Zach, forget I said that.
The views are
Yeah.
going to crater.
They've been doing really
shouldn't
well
tell them
recently.
Because they'll just log off and come back when Zach's back.
We're assuming they like Zach. We
How
got
long do we
no
think Zach's
data.
hair will be? Will it be
That's
ponytail length by then?
true. I reckon top
Man
knot. He's
bun?
coming. Yeah.
That'd be great.
I don't ever want to see Zach with a man bun.
Okay, this is how the World Leaderboard looks right now. Throughout today's episode, we're going to be moving up our winners and moving down our losers to adjust the board based on what's happened in the last week. And I think we probably should get straight into it. And let's start with our winners this week. Okay, Georgina, it's been a minute, so we'll let you go first. Seems only fair. Who is your winner this week?
Crazy U-turn. My winner this week is Chinese President Xi Jinping. This is kind of unprecedented for me. I don't think I've ever moved him on the board before. Definitely not up anyway.
Oh, I can fact check this while you're talking.
Okay, yeah, fact check me. He also hasn't moved actually and since May the 18th, which is a bit mad. But this is because this week a Chinese shipping company has launched a new route across the Arctic, which is the first freight route ever to cross the Arctic, across the North Pole. And this is basically in response to the closure of both the Strait of Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandab. And so, for context, China has its own Strait of Hormuz type bottleneck, which is the Strait of Malacca, which is it connects the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea. Around 2/3 of all Chinese maritime imports pass through this strait, and 80% of China's oil imports. So it's very dependent on this strait for its trade, both imports and exports. But for a long time, China's been aware that this is a potential bottleneck that could be blockaded in the event of a conflict. 2 decades ago, in 2003, China's then president called it the Malacca Dilemma, basically referring to the possibility of the US being able to close the strait and devastate China's economy. And so for the past 2 decades, China's been very aware that this could end up being a problem, but it hasn't become as urgent as in the past year. And now, obviously, there's huge disruptions happening to supply chains and trade being rerouted away from the Red Sea because of both the Houthis and the IRG, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps. And so China, having anticipated this, has for a long time been looking at creating a new Arctic shipping lane, which instead of going around from China's east coast down through the Strait of Malacca into the Indian Ocean, across through the Bab el-Mandab Strait, up through the Suez Canal to Europe, China is instead looking at using this route round the northern coast of Russia that skirts through the Arctic. And this is a smart move from China because, I mean, they've seen this potential bottleneck problem arising a long time ago. And it also means that the waterway, the Bering Strait, which is the only choke point along this route, is entirely controlled by Russia. So there's no danger really of hostile ships or actors like the Houthis going and bombing Chinese ships that will pass. China-Russia relations obviously mean that China will be granted permits to sail through. There's obviously a whole load of logistical and safety constraints with using the Arctic as a shipping lane. But for me, when you contrast the two situations of the two biggest powers in the world, China, which has been so long-term in its thinking and its preparation and so strategic for so many decades, and America, which is under Trump is like the epitome of reactive and just sort of throwing things around and then responding to things on the spot and then changing when something else happens. The difference to me in those two approaches is like just sort of sums up the divergence that's occurring between the US and the West and China now. And Zach obviously talks about this a lot, and has written about it in our magazine, the China-US relationship at the moment. But I think, if you just step back from it and you look at the fact that China has quietly been working on this workaround, and the US is there, deciding whether or not to blockade the strait again, then blockading the blockade of the strait, and then it's complete. They are diametrically opposed approaches, and I think China is really showing up Trump and the US on the world stage, and it's pretty embarrassing for America.
Yeah. Okay, Xi moves up on the board. He is increasing his lead, increasing from a +4 to a +5. And you are indeed correct, Georgina. You've never touched Xi before. In fact, almost exclusively Zach moved Xi. Rory's moved him a few times. As far as I can tell, Ben and Nadja never did.
I wonder what percentage of Xi moves have been Zach.
I think having scanned the list, it is
90 something.
I think it's less than that,
Okay.
but it is like 70-80%, I believe. Very interesting topic, one that I know we've made a video on, kind of the situation, and one I would be remiss from lightly promoting that we discussed while in Greenland, the Arctic shipping corridors, both across kind of Russia's northern coast, the one that China is using, but also kind of through Canada and Greenland, kind of round the other way. There's a whole episode all about that. So if you haven't seen our Greenland documentary yet, head over to TLDR Party to check that out. And if you're a TLDR Party member already, see, I'm not even trying to sign up new people. It's fine. Don't sign up if you don't want. But if you're already a member, the third episode, which is all about the shipping lanes, is out right now. Came out a couple of weeks ago. So if you are interested in that kind of topic about kind of the future of trade and shipping and how China's getting an edge, and potentially Russia too, getting a lot of power through all of their Arctic ports, their kind of military Arctic fleet is far bigger than the West's, almost even combined. Then you can check out the third episode of our Greenland doc by heading to TLDR Party. Yes.
I was going to say as well on that, the military Arctic fleet, something else that's very relevant to the story that people might not think about a lot is the US projects massive naval power, right? And we think of it in terms of the US naval fleet in the Indo-Pacific or around Latin America, the whole naval buildup around Venezuela that we saw at the end of last year and start of this year. But in terms of, again, the future and what's going to be the next possibly big sphere of geopolitical competition, the Arctic is emerging as that now, and that's become clear. But China has, again, been on this for a long time, and because of China's massive industrial capacity, I don't know the exact numbers, but I know China already has many more icebreakers than the US Navy does, and the icebreaker ships are what's going to be required to get commercial shipping vessels through the Arctic safely, because they have to be escorted. Russia also has, at the moment, more icebreakers than America, but Russia's obviously economy is tied up in the war now, and all of their industrial capacity has gone towards the war in Ukraine. So they're also falling behind in terms of being able to keep up with demand for commercial transits through the Arctic by producing more icebreakers. But China eventually is probably also, if not already, going to become self-sufficient in terms of producing ships to protect the shipping going through the Arctic. So again, it's just, and the US is not, I mean, even like US, AUKUS sub deliveries have been delayed, right, to Australia, and other military aircraft and parts that have been bought by European countries because America's industrial base hasn't kept up at the same rate as China's. So that's also something that will allow China to pull further ahead in the future.
Yeah, and not to kind of undermine the icebreaker point, because I think it is valid. And like, as you say, the kind of broader conversation about China's readiness in the Arctic sphere is like very different, and Russia too, to the West. But what makes the whole area even more interesting is the fact that we are beginning to see ships transit without that. The first one happened a couple of years ago through Canada, I believe, that was unescorted by icebreakers, just went through. And I think it's 2050, so like just over 20 years away, 25 years away, where we're expecting to have our first ice-free Arctic winter, which is kind of crazy.
It's very worrying.
Summer, right?
Sorry?
Arctic summer.
Arctic summer, sorry. Yes, you're right. Arctic winter would be crazy. But even still, like, we are reaching a point whereby that kind of military tech will still be needed, but we're kind of evolving to a new sphere of kind of conversation when it comes to the Arctic. I want to cycle back quickly before we close on this. The point you made about the kind of contrast in approach, not specific to shipping or kind of the Arctic or whatever else, but the contrast in approach between the US and China, obviously that's most evident through Trump and kind of both Trump terms, even Biden to some extent. Not that he was as chaotic, I suppose, or as kind of unpredictable, but just the kind of contrast between those people created real fluctuation and turbulence in kind of American strategy. Do you think it's more broadly true that we're just entering an era where America's focus is so scattered and its politics so polarized that it is kind of unable to match China's like monolithic kind of strategic approach, and that's just kind of driving both superpowers in different directions, that America will always be kind of really all over the place in its policy? It has to kind of fluctuate year by year versus China, which can really focus and create long-term plans in a way the West can't. Do you think that's true, and do you think it matters if it is?
Could I open that up to the floor?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a big question.
I think, I mean, the funny thing is, you mentioned like, you know, going from Biden or Trump to Biden to Trump, and that being like, you get the fluctuations there. But even just within Trump's term, he's swung wildly from being like, sanctions are the way to achieve things. No, like trade tariffs are, no military intervention is. Now he's back to sanctions because the military intervention hasn't really gone very well. So you've got those wild fluctuations even within one presidential term. And I think China has the benefit of, you know, not being a democracy and having swinging between parties or leaders, and having one leader who can set out a sort of long-term vision and pursue that. But even with what's happened in the last few years under sort of during the second Trump presidency, China has sort of just been able to like sit back and watch. I mean, obviously it has had to react, but so much of the chaos has just been from the US side, and China has done well out of it just by matter of fact of saying like, hang on, this is
especially on foreign policy. They're very able to do that.
Yeah, and you see these opinions, the public opinion on China around the world changing in China's favor purely because the US has really sort of bottled it, I guess.
I mean, sorry, I had a thought eventually. It took me a while to formulate my response, so I was like, Rory, get in first. I'm like slightly wary of going down this route, but I think it is relevant. I do think a lot of the difference between the two nations and the way they're set up and the way they think is also a cultural thing. And I think it's interesting that Rory used the word watch when it comes to China just sitting back and watching what America does. I feel like that is also the case within America, and so much of American politics is spectacle. And whereas for China, it's the complete opposite. It's like head down, get on, like let's be competent and get stuff done. Whereas in America, it's so much like there's so much money flowing around. There's so much media attention that comes with being in of a high political profile. And I think now with social media as well, and the big tech giants and all of this sort of fragmentation of media, and it sort of feels like we've reached a point where that is so that it defines American politics right now. And China has never been on that train. Yeah. And obviously some of that, again, is just the democracy versus autocracy point. But I think it's also to do with like the amount of money that sloshes around politics and midterms and primaries and the scenes and the spectacles and interviews. And I don't know, it just sort of, I think it peels politically inclined people in the US away from like doing stuff for the benefit of their country in the long run, and more towards like, you know, what's the campaign pledge that's going to get me in office, or what's the right sort of note to hit in order to win over this part of the electorate. And it's a lot more of the game playing. Yeah. That's also the case across the Western world. And again, that is just a democracy versus autocracy point for the most part. But I do also think the cultural point is very relevant. And on the whole, China is just a lot more cohesive, unified, although I suppose that's been sort of beaten into you. You don't really have a choice.
Yes, that's the downside.
Yeah.
Let us know what you think about that question. Have a conversation in the comments if you'd like to. I'd be curious
to read, actually.
Rory, let's jump to you next. Yes. Who is your winner this week?
My winner this week is Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Another person at the top of the board, staying up there. I've got two reasons. The first is that last week, Turkey, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia signed a mutual defense pact, which has been in the works for a couple of years and has been sort of spearheaded by Turkey. I think it's fair to say it was one of Erdogan's government's goals was to sort of bring that together. So that is an achievement in and of itself. But the main reason that I'm moving him up this week is because the Turkish parliament just approved legislation that aims to advance a peace deal with sort of the Kurdish insurgents, the PKK, aiming to end I think now 40-something year insurgency and Turkey's longest running conflict, effectively, which I think is a really major bit of news. And because this has been a story going on for the last couple of years, there's been a few steps towards this. There hasn't been like one moment where it's like, right, the war's done, everything's peaceful, everything's great. So you don't have that big historic moment, or at least not yet. So it's sort of flown under the radar slightly, I think. But effectively, this peace deal has its origins in, I think, late 2024 into 2025, where the Turkish government secretly started talking to a guy called Abdullah, I don't know how you say his name now, I think about it, but Öcalan, who is a Kurdish leader who has been imprisoned for decades in really, really tight, strict conditions. And through these talks, they ended up getting him to call for the PKK, this Kurdish insurgent movement, which is designated as a terrorist group by Turkey and various other countries in the West as well. Basically, he called for them to lay down their arms and move towards peace. And part of this deal is that the Turkish government, through this legislation, is effectively advancing, I think technically they're not pardons, but they are pretty close to pardons for thousands of Kurdish fighters. And also, by doing that, will enable lots of effectively exiled Kurds who are now in mostly northern Iraq to return to Turkey safely. And the flip side of that is that the PKK is in the process of dissolving and disarming. And after that point, there will need to be some more political reforms, presumably. But it is a big moment. And I think for Erdogan, there's three main reasons why he is pursuing this. Because previously, there was almost a false start with a Kurdish peace deal about a decade and a half ago under Erdogan. But he's more known for like really going in with a military solution. So it seems like quite a big turnaround. But actually, I think there are three main reasons why he's done this. The first is just, he's getting, pretty old now. Having that legacy of ending Turkey's longest running conflict is a pretty good one. The second is that by doing so, it will enable him to help stabilize Syria, post-Assad Syria, because obviously the Kurdish, I don't know what the right word, I'm going to say Kurdish nation. It's not a unified nation, but crosses the borders of Iran, Iraq, Turkey, Syria. And in Syria, one of the big questions is how to unify the country now that the Assad regime is gone and sort of integrate the pretty autonomous Kurdish region into the rest of Syria. And by bringing peace to this Turkish-Kurdish conflict, that will enable that to happen easier. And also because it will enable Turkey to have better ties with Iraq, because Iraq has always been a bit frustrated with Turkey that it will cross the border, with airstrikes and sort of military attacks to attack PKK insurgents in Iraq. If this conflict is over, then that is a chance for Turkey and Iraq to build their ties up again. And Turkey wants strong ties with Iraq because there's like oil pipelines and gas pipelines that pass through. But the third thing is a lot more cynical, and that is that Erdogan is term limited. He can't run again unless the Turkish parliament calls an early election. So I think he could call an early election, but if he does that, he wouldn't be allowed to run again. But if the parliament does it, he is allowed to run again because it's effectively them ending his term early. His party, his alliance doesn't have enough votes in parliament to do that. But with the support of the Kurdish parties, he would have enough votes. So at some point, we might see the result of a little quid pro quo where they do end his term early and allow him to run again. But we'll have to wait and see. There's still quite a lot of things to do before this peace deal is sort of finalized and we can really say that the conflict, the insurgency is over. The PKK wants Abdullah Öcalan to be freed. There isn't any move to do that within this legislation. I think if they were to do it, they'd have to do it in separate legislation. But I think the Turkish government is wary of doing that. They might improve his conditions, but releasing him would be quite a big step. And also you've got the political reforms that, Kurdish people were fighting for decades, which is, more autonomy, greater rights, and, political involvement in Turkey. That will have to come later. And if Erdogan doesn't deliver on that, then there's every chance that it falls apart and sort of conflict reignites again. So we're not there yet, but this was a big, big step towards it. So I think that's why Erdogan's got to be a winner.
Okay, as you said earlier, he's already at the top of the board, which means that rather than moving up again, he gets a +1 next to his name, which designates the fact that were there more space, he would have moved up an additional spot. You said that this kind of happened under the radar. Has there been kind of any international or domestic reaction of note to this? Has there been, is Erdogan getting a bounce from it or any kind of plaudits from his European neighbours?
I think I haven't really seen much international reaction to it. I think every step of the way there has been obviously statements welcoming the progress, and that's all you can really expect for now. But the difficult and awkward thing is that in doing this, which is I think everyone would agree is a good thing, it's against the backdrop of a massive crackdown on Turkey's political opposition in other parts of the country. And obviously there is that cynical point that he might be doing this to keep himself in power. So I think everyone's wary of being too congratulatory to him. And that puts opposition parties in Turkey in a difficult position as well, because they presumably don't want to be seen as preventing peace. But if they're worried that this is just Erdogan's attempt to stay in power, they don't want to help it effectively. So it's a tricky situation for them as well. Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see what happens, I think.
Definitely.
How long would that leave him in power for? Do you know what, if he was, well, I guess it depends when the election
The next election is meant to be 2028, so it would have to be 2027, presumably. And I think it's I'm trying to think. There was an election in 2023, and before then, I think there was one in...
Some 4-ish years?
Yeah, 4 or 5, I would say.
Into the 2030s.
Yeah.
Erdogan could be hanging around on the board for a good
Very
while.
long time.
Okay, for the moment though, as I say, he is moving up on the board. Okay, before we move on to the audience's suggestion this week, a quick shout out to the upcoming issue of our magazine, Too Long. We've already mentioned at least one article from this issue. I can show you that article. It's the one about the kind of US-China relationship. Here is the main page. Well, there you go.
Very nicely designed.
And here's
as always.
There's more. Lovely pictures of their little trip. I do like this because they're all pictures from when Trump and Xi hung out in China. And I think
what do you think they talk about?
Well, that's the thing is I like the pictures of Trump just looking shocked here, looking at something. It's like, what are they looking at? What are they talking about? Are they talking about the history of the buildings?
I reckon Trump just yaps and she's like...
Imagine being a translator who has to translate what Trump says. That's difficult.
You would have to leave out so much stuff, I think.
You really would.
She can't be hearing all of it,
No, it's very fair. But yes, this issue is coming out this September, so not long, a few weeks away. So if you're not already a subscriber, then you might want to check... what was I going to say?
Check yourself.
Check Coming for you. If you're not already... Are we
check the cameras in your house.
We're not cutting that. No. We're threatening the audience. That's crazy. Wow. High stakes if you don't subscribe. If you're not a subscriber, you might want to purchase a copy now. And if you subscribe using code SUMMER26, you get £3 off your first copy, which brings the price down to like a £5 if you're getting the digital edition. And remember, you can get a digital edition. We always show off the physical one because
people
it's
like
exciting.
the digital editions.
People like the digital one. And also, it just arrives in your inbox. You don't have to wait for it to arrive, especially if you live a long way from the UK where they're being shipped from. Shipping can be reasonably expensive. We don't make any money on it. In fact, we lose money on shipping to most countries because we don't want it to be like ludicrously expensive, so we subsidize it. But still, if the shipping cost is too expensive, if the tariffs are now getting too expensive for some countries, then you can pick up a digital edition and then it just gets emailed to you, and like you don't have to worry about all that. Because
do you want to explain the design like concept? Because I like it.
For this?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. The front cover section and the internal kind of the first section is all about Europe Reborn and about the plan to save Europe. So the design aesthetic is all kind of based around the concept of like blueprints and like mathematical diagram, kind of golden ratio kind of vibes. Yeah, it's going for that. It's kind of like a design language to kind of suggest the idea of the plan to save Europe and kind of that kind of stuff. So
fans of geometry will love it.
There's a lot of geometry in it.
Is that the first front cover we've done where there's actually someone on it who's not Trump?
It's the first color front cover of a person, I believe. Because Trump was on Most Influential Person, issue number 4. There are a number of world leaders on issue number 3 for the How the World Votes. But yeah, we've never had a color front cover with just a picture of a person. I mean, it's obviously got other stuff too, but yeah, which is kind of intentional. I mean, this is now we're not even an advert, we're just talking about the design of the magazine. But I was aware that I kind of eventually we needed a front cover that just was a picture of someone or like a lightly edited picture of someone. I thought just doing like the other ones, like eventually we would need to change. So this one's one that's breaking the mold ahead of the 10th edition at the end of the year. Who knows what that one will look like.
Crazy.
Very special, I imagine. I've got an idea for the 10th edition, which none of you are going to like.
Wow.
But we'll come to that another day.
Great.
Okay. Was that an advert? Was it a threat mixed with a design conversation? Who knows? toolong.news if you'd like to pick up a copy. Okay, so every week we let the audience decide one person who we either add to the board or move on the board based on your comments from the previous episode. Last week, the most liked comment was for Abiy Ahmed, the Ethiopian Prime Minister, who currently is in the positive section. Looks like it's been a while since we've last spoken about him. So we need to determine if he's a winner or a loser this week and move him on the basis of that. Rory, Abiy Ahmed, winner or loser?
I think loser this week. And I thought we had talked about him fairly recently, but maybe not. It might be one of those
I might
where
be lying to you.
It might also be one of those where we discuss whether to discuss him.
Yeah,
and
in the meeting.
In my head turns into a conversation about him.
Oh yeah. He was Zach's winner on July 1st,
Okay.
so
That must
it's
have
not
been
been
the
long.
election.
Yeah. So he did win a big election victory that at that time Zach moved him up for. So putting that aside, I think he should move down again because as seems to constantly be the case, Ethiopia is on the edge of another pretty terrible civil war, possibly a repeat of the Tigray war that happened a couple of years ago that was very, very devastating. You've got the federal forces, which, the federal government, Abiy Ahmed's government, reportedly sort of building up troops on one side of the border with the Tigray region and then Tigrayan troops on the other. So tensions are escalating. And then in the last few days, there was allegedly a drone strike by the Ethiopian military that killed, I don't actually know how many people, but, quite a lot of people. That is only going to contribute to tensions. I don't know enough to be able to say whether it is going to spill into an all-out war or not, but it does feel like we've had these moments before.
Yeah.
And sometimes it doesn't turn into anything, and sometimes it does. But I think just that we're at this point again suggests that he has been unable to settle things and unify the country. So I think he's probably moving down for that.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't sound good. This is one that Zach would love to have been here for. This feels like a real gift from the audience to Zach that he's not here for. Georgina, I presume you agree with that? Not looking good in Ethiopia?
No, I agree.
Okay, in which case, Abiy Ahmed moving down to the lightly negative section. A real shame. You win an election, you move up on the board. You think you're on a winning streak. And then, wars look like they're about to break out again. RB Ahmed won't be our only loser this week, though. Let's move on to our losers of the week. Georgina, jumping back over to you. Who is your loser this week?
Yes, I have a new face to add to the board today.
Whoa, it's been a minute.
Yeah, I don't tend to add new faces as well, I think. So here we go for a big one.
Yeah.
This is the Prime Minister of Mongolia, Niam Osorin Ural. I hope I've pronounced that right.
It's the most right it's going to be said by anyone on this podcast.
It sounded convincing as well.
I think it probably is right, to be fair. And this, I think, is a very interesting story. For context, as people will know, should know, Mongolia is a massive but extremely sparsely populated country sandwiched between Russia and China. It is 97% dependent on Russia for its fuel imports and the other 3% on China. And we made on the TLDR EU video a few weeks ago a video on Russia's escalating fuel crisis. So in the past 6 months or so, Ukraine has been waging this very successful campaign, long-range missile strikes against Russian oil processing facilities, some far out from Moscow, very deep behind the front lines. And that video was very much from the perspective of the impact on the Russian economy, the impact on ordinary Russians, consumers. And it's a good thing for Ukraine because it's been a very successful campaign. But what we don't tend to think about a lot is, well, why would you, I guess, but is the impact on Mongolia, which is basically entirely dependent on Russia for its fuel. And so this fuel crisis that is hurting Russian consumers is also massively hurting the Mongolian economy and just ordinary Mongolians as well. And so the country now is sort of teetering on the brink. I think Mongolia's oil reserves are at critical lows at the moment. And this week, the Prime Minister, Ukral, has introduced a range of austerity measures, which are quite severe, including the cancellation of all political conferences, forums, events, and a ban on leaving the country without government approval. And in Mongolia, most fuel stations are basically out of oil now. Mongolia does have a supply agreement with Russia, which means that Russia isn't allowed to let Mongolia go without fuel. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to be below Russia still in the pecking order when it comes to supplying it. And yeah, so Mongolia is basically stuck because what can you do if you're a massive country that's got really minimal infrastructure and you're entirely dependent on Russia, which is suffering this massive fuel crisis. But in March, Mongolia began talks with Kazakhstan, which has far more oil processing facilities than Mongolia does, which in fact is only constructing its own first refinery now, financed by India, to be completed by 2028. But obviously this is not going to be in time, given the state and acceleration of the fuel crisis at the moment. And there's a couple of things that have made this Russian fuel crisis bad for Mongolia, especially this year, which are Mongolia's mining boom for the first point in the past, which has contributed to an increase in demand of 14% for fuel. And secondly, a boom in tourism. And I'm pretty sure I read that this summer has been the highest. Mongolia's had the highest number of foreign visitors on record. I think I read that, might be wrong. But in any case, it's been a big year for Mongolian tourism. And also, this is an interesting point because Mongolia has bet quite heavily on tourism along with a lot of the other Central Asian countries, as like a way to boost its economy over the next few years. You might have noticed, I don't know, like an increase in the number of adverts for Mongolia or Mongolian sponsored art or events. I've certainly noticed that in the UK anyway. And now this is slightly backfiring because tourists, again, important point, on the 4th of August, the US Embassy in Mongolia advised all Americans to not travel to Mongolia or to leave if they're there because there's basically no petrol. And cars are having to queue for 3 hours multiple times on the same day, sometimes, to try and get fuel at stations. And it's sort of descending into a bit of you have to know a guy in order to get fuel. And there's also a sort of secondary fuel black market situation arising where people are hoarding supplies and selling it at double or triple the price. So it's really bad. It's a really bad state of affairs there. And the prime minister is, as a representative of Mongolia, going down for that reason.
Okay, he is being added to the board, but immediately as a loser. So therefore, he'll be added to the lightly negative section. The rules of the board dictate that when you're added to the board, you're either added to lightly positive or lightly negative. So as a new entry, he's being added to lightly negative. Speaking of Mongolian tourism.
Oh, yeah. Just been there. So
How
I can tell you. Oh, I nearly got stuck there.
Yeah?
Yeah. We had to queue multiple times to try and get petrol from stations for 3 hours at a time.
Yeah.
And we only ended up getting it because the drivers knew a guy.
Really?
Yeah. But at one point the like group that we were traveling with, our guide said, just FYI guys, like if we don't manage to get petrol today in this tiny town in Eastern Mongolia, then like we're stuck basically.
Crazy.
And we were all kind of like, sick.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't want to ask what the backup plan was because I was like, well, what is it though?
Yeah.
Like, are we going to get picked up by someone who has petrol from the capital, or like we're just going to have to chill here? Yeah, I'm just going to be stranded. I was thinking, are the British embassy going to fly me out? And I thought, Brits won't do that. Not for me.
Aside from the fuel shortage, though, and the fact that tourists are being told not to go there, should we go?
Yeah. Just take a lot of fuel with you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like pay for extra hand luggage and fill it with petrol.
Can you take fuel on planes?
Absolutely
Definitely not.
No way. They're strict on batteries, let alone.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because also kind of mad. When I was flying out from Frankfurt, the lady sitting next to me on the plane when we arrived in Frankfurt was like, where are you going after this? And I was like, Mongolia. And she was like, oh, I'm going there for the first time next week. And I was like, no way. And she was going for COP17, which is it won't be a main COP, it will be some other kind of COP, but it's like what was she saying? It's hosted in a developing nation each year, and it's sort of a gathering of like public-private partnership people with an emphasis on sustainable development or something like that. And this conference is being hosted, I think, this week or last week, the week after I left. And that, I presume, would have been one of the last events that was allowed to be hosted before the government has cancelled all events because of the fuel shortage.
An interesting backdrop for a conference like that, to like be talking about fuel shortages while also talking about like green energy and the future and climate and all those kind of things. Like very weird.
It is like it's a crazy country and a crazy economy as well, because you at the same time as Mongolia is, I think, one of the top 10 most exposed, might be wrong here, countries to the impacts of climate change. It's also trying to beef up its mining industry, because I guess it's just like quick extraction, quick money, foreign investment. You can easily get Chinese companies, Russian companies, German companies to sign on. Oh, I also went down a mine, by the way, which is pretty cool.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't think I've told anyone about that. It was quite mad.
Why?
What kind of mine?
Fluoride mine.
Oh.
Yeah.
Was it like
so Mongolia is the third biggest fluoride producer in the world.
Crazy.
And fluoride is used itself in the processing of iron ore. So it's not like you get the fluoride and you, I don't know, make
toothpaste.
Or like make smartphones with it or whatever.
Was it like one of those massive open mines, or was it like you went down a little mine shaft?
We went down in the lift. It was crazy. And then they had this one room. I'm just talking about my trip now, but welcome everyone to my life. They had this, we got to the next bit of the mine, and then the man was like, yes, this is the scary room. And we were like, the scary room? And he was like, yeah, go in if you want. And I hate haunted houses, but I was like, if my teenage cousins can do it, then I can do it. Yeah. Mistake. But they had, in the middle of this mine, in the middle of rural Eastern Mongolia, 45 meters under the ground, this room that was basically a haunted house with like moving animatronics and flashing lights. And like you entered and like you take a few steps, and then this witch lady this plastic witch lady was like head banging at you. It was honestly like the craziest. I think was I on drugs, or was this just like what happened?
It was all the fluoride.
It was all the fluoride, yeah. And then so she was like banging her head at you and like screaming, and they had speakers that would echo off the walls of the mine.
Why?
They're cancelling conferences because of fuel shortages, but they're still like the witch animatronic is still going.
Yeah. Oh, they also had a disco room in the mine. They had like a disco corridor,
Oh God.
which had like scintillating coloured lights and like lasers and stuff as you walk.
Is this
through.
an actively used mine? It's like, are there people like working around the corner?
No, it's It's like I think it's still in operation. Yeah,
It's
but like you have to go 400 meters if you want to get to that.
yeah,
level.
okay, fine.
I was not going that deep. 45.
Could you go that deep?
Yeah. Well, no.
Okay.
Presumably not as a tourist.
I went down a mine in Wales that was like that. No haunted stuff. But it was a very deep mine shaft, and it is kind of creepy on its own.
Yeah.
And when you said the scary room and like haunted house, I was like, well, obviously it's not going to be a haunted house. What do you mean? But
yeah.
it was.
Yeah. Mad. Really crazy. And I could have got stuck there. I mean, if they
witches?
ran out of fuel for the lift, I could have died in that mine.
Well, thank goodness you didn't.
Yeah. Anyway, to bring it back to politics, though, sorry, the other point I was going to say about Mongolia, since I probably won't have the opportunity to talk about it again before we purge him, let's be realistic, is that Mongolia was already in a period of very chaotic politics. Rory, in the last edition of Too Long, or a few editions ago, wrote about the Gen Z protests that swept across parts of Asia and Africa since 2023, I think. And Mongolia went through its version of that in 2024 or 5. I think it was 4, which is sort of the catalyst. I think it was summer 2024. Anyway, it might have been ongoing, which began the catalyst for the downfall of the then Prime Minister Lufsanamthraim Oyunerne, who resigned in June 2025. And the process basically came down to the fact that his son was very well off and well-to-do, which is the case also for a lot of the Mongolian political class, whose kids are often studying in Western universities, getting their MBAs, going home, and then getting a cushy political job. Anyway, so he resigned in 2025. Then the next prime minister took over, June 2025, Gombo Javin Zandan Shatar. I've definitely not nailed that one. And he took over and then resigned tried to resign in November or December last year, 2025. But then there was this protracted, long, drawn out back and forth political deadlock, factional infighting, certain parties or factions wanting him to stay, certain ones trying to get him out. And this went on for months and months until March, when the current Prime Minister, Niam Osorin Ukral, took over. He's a former hip-hop artist by the name of Timon, by the way.
Should have led with that. That's great.
Yeah. And so he came in with this background of political chaos in Mongolia, at the helm of a shaky coalition. He's now dealing with this, was already dealing at the time with the Strait of Hormuz fuel crisis, now got the secondary fuel crisis as a result of the Russian war. It really is bad. And it's all very chaotic. So, I mean, best of luck, I suppose.
I was thinking that I need to think more about this, but there's definitely something to be written about rappers / hip hop artists turning into politicians, because Prime Minister of Nepal was a rapper.
Yeah.
Mamdani used to be a rapper.
Yeah. The rapper to politician.
I mean, that's 3,
pipeline.
so that's pretty strong.
That's an issue of article of Too Long,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Rory. Let's
God, yeah.
jump back to you.
Swift.
Hopefully it's a country you've been to and you've got a lot of good anecdotes about.
No,
Who is your
sadly
loser this week?
not. Mine is the military chief of Pakistan, Asim Munir. Unfortunately, I haven't been, but
Sure, there's some good haunted houses there.
yeah, you think so? So the reason he's moving down is because there's been quite significant unrest in Pakistan-administered Kashmir, a province called, I think, Azad Kashmir. And we often hear about stuff happening in Indian Kashmir because there's a lot of unrest there, because the Indian government wants to incorporate it fully into India, and sort of local people aren't always happy about that. And then there's been unrest and security lockdowns and all of that. And you hear a lot about that. And I think because of that, there's a general assumption that things are fairly smoothly running in Pakistan administered Kashmir, but obviously that isn't the case, as these recent events have shown. So essentially what happened is that in Kashmir, I'm just going to say Kashmir, but when I say Kashmir, I mean Pakistani administered Kashmir.
Okay.
A local group called the Joint Awami Action Committee, or JAAC, started protesting, calling for electoral reform because the region is having an election currently. The regional assembly has 12 seats set aside for people designated as refugees from Indian administered Kashmir. But the reason why local people don't like that is because they say that those seats often just get filled by people elsewhere in the country, and it's effectively a way for the Pakistani government to like exert influence on the region through these reserved seats. So the JAAC was was calling for those seats to be abolished and various other electoral reform to give greater autonomy effectively to their region. They started protesting in like June going into July. Those protests turned into quite like violent clashes with security forces. The government banned the group. I think they declared them a terrorist organization. So quite a strong ban. And clashes continued and dozens of people have been killed. But the elections that have been happening, they're meant to be across like 3 stages. And the third stage was meant to finish on Monday, but it's been delayed because of the unrest and because of groups calling for people to boycott it. So I think at time of recording, they still haven't actually finished this election, and it's proving quite difficult, which is bad news for Asim Munir because, and we should say Asim Munir, he's the head of the armed forces in Pakistan. He is probably the most powerful person in Pakistan. They do have a prime minister, Shehbaz Sharif, who is the head of government, but he's not represented here because Asim Munir is probably calling the shots.
Yeah.
He was on a bit of an upwards trajectory on the board because
+1.
Yeah, diplomatically speaking, Pakistan was doing really well. It had become a bit of like a key mediator in various conflicts. It came out on top, sort of at least in the narrative sense, in the narrative battle with India after their clash with India last year. So he was doing well, but this has suddenly exposed quite a significant vulnerability in Pakistan, and just adds to the various regional difficulties that the Pakistani government faces. So you've got Kashmir in the north, then in the south, sort of southwest, you've got Balochistan, which I think we've done videos on before. There's a separatist movement there. And then obviously they are still at war with the Taliban in Afghanistan. So there's lots of these security challenges going on, and the Pakistani government has accused the sort of protesters in Kashmir of being sponsored by the Indian government, which they deny, the protesters and I think the Indian government deny. But it just goes to show that even what is effectively a local regional issue gets pulled into these like international disputes and these sort of contrasting accusations of you're backed by a foreign power, you're not legitimately protesting, that type of thing. So I don't know what the resolution will be, or even when they'll be able to finish this election, but it's not looking great.
No, certainly not. He's moving down from the top of the board. He was previously on a +1, but that doesn't mean anything when you're moving down. The +1 gets immediately stripped from him, and he gets pulled down to the regularly positive section, which, I mean, there's worse places to be. Okay, so with that, let's move to the last section of the main episode, our ultimate winner and ultimate loser of the week. Okay, so the way this works is each of us now gets to select one of the winners and one of the losers as our ultimate winner and loser of the week. If we have unanimity on either of them, that person then moves an additional spot on the board based on our votes. For your options for winners, you've either got Erdogan or Xi Jinping. Rory, you can go first. Who is your ultimate winner of the week?
I've backed my own choice and I've gone for Erdogan. I think the moves towards peace are pretty big deal, and also didn't talk about it much, but the defense pact is a pretty big deal, and there's a video that people should watch about it on the global channel.
Georgina?
I have also gone for Erdogan. I was convinced I was convinced by the dual it sounds like smart politics, sort of tying up the peace. You know, you can't argue against the peace argument, and yet if it's ultimately keeping him in power, it's quite smart.
I agreed.
Wow.
I think if we're judging it by people's own aims to get a little sneaky way around to be able to stay in power, that's a pretty big win. Okay, and your options for ultimate loser, you've got 3 choices here. You've got Abi Ahmed from the audience, you've got Asa Munir, and of course you have...
Nyam Osorin Ufral.
And if you want to do him, you can just put his first name, Nyam.
That's his second. That's the first part of his second name.
You can do that too. If otherwise, no one's going to vote for him just because they're scared.
Mate, what's his initials? Let's call him
NOU.
NOU.
If you want to vote, I'm not telling you to vote for him. I'm just saying, if you wanted to. Okay, Rory, who did you vote for?
I've gone for Mr. NOU. I think it sounds like a pretty bad situation going on there. It's, nationwide fuel crisis, pretty tricky. And also, first-hand reporting.
True.
I've got to back that up. So
thanks. I also have gone for Mr. NOU, aka Timon.
Very good.
Or FKA Timon, actually.
Whoa.
Formerly known as.
Oh, I see. I didn't. I went far away, Ahmed.
Actually, to be fair, that's not.
It's about to see the war's coming back. He just won an election and immediately more war.
But specifically this week, banning people from leaving the country.
It's a rough look, I'll give you that. Okay, so Erdogan moves up an additional spot, gets a +1 next to his name. So many people with pluses next to their names at the top of the board. It's kind of crazy. And the losers stay put. We didn't reach unanimity there. So this is how the board looks at the end of the main episode, but that's not all we've got today. In today's episode of The Last Move, we'll be discussing 3 more people that we haven't discussed in a while, 3 non-movers, and we'll be giving them a last move. All 3 of them slightly rogue, people we haven't talked about in a while. Some we've basically never talked about before, which does mean I'm going to be suggesting that we purge some of them. We'll see whether that happens. We'll see if anyone gets cut from the board in the last move. The last move is exclusively available to TLDR party members. So if you're a party member, head over to TLDR party right now and you can continue watching, watch the rest of the conversation, the rest of the podcast. If you're not a party member yet, it only costs £4 a month. Signing up gets you access to the last move, as well as our other exclusive podcasts, including Andemonium, our UK politics podcast, which is coming back next week or launching next week, only on TLDR party. You also get access to our documentaries like Greenland that I mentioned earlier, and you get access to the audio versions of all of the major articles in Too Long, or basically every article in Too Long. So if you're not a big reader, but you want to be able to listen along, like our videos normally, you can listen along to all of the articles in Too Long, which is very fun. Check it out, £4 a month. If not, we'll see you next week for more winners, more losers, more leaderboard. See you then.
Very nice.
Okay, so let's move on to the audience's suggestion for this week.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I didn't need to say that.
A classic, oh yeah, from Georgina. Learning the format as we go.
Yeah. It's been a while. She hasn't been here for ages.
Yeah.
You're in with the ultimate winner and loser. So that's going to be exciting.
Oh, yeah. Genuinely. What's it called? Lack of object permanence?
Yeah.